welcome everybody, and thank you to my special guest, Ron Fortier, who is with us today here on Storytellers Mag. I'm your host, Adam Messer, and welcome, Ron. Thank you very much for being here today.
Oh, hey, thank you, Adam. It's always a pleasure and fun to talk with you, and congratulations on the launch of the new Storyteller Mag.
Oh, I'm so excited about it, Ron, and that's why one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show was because I really love your enthusiasm about storytelling, and you've created a lot of like really cool stuff, and you and I, we talked a bunch, and then you have a lot of different projects going on and all, and so yeah, I'm excited about this whole new podcast / magazine. And I'm glad that your interview is going to be our very first episode and magazine. So, thank you.
Well, thank you, Adam. That's a really flattering, and I'm very honored. I really appreciate that a lot. Hopefully, I'll get you started off on the right foot.
Oh yeah, definitely. So this show, Ron, is focused on the fun side of storytelling. A lot of times on these different shows, like even with my radio show, I talk with creators and authors and things like that, people like that, and we talk a lot about like the nuts and bolts of creating and writing and stuff like that. But often we don't talk about like the fun side of creating and storytelling, and that's one of the things that I love is like a great story that just sticks with you. And so for you, what makes a good story, and what makes it enjoyable and fun?
Okay, well, I mean, the answer to that to me is always characters, all right? Because when I'm reading, my favorite writers are those people who can make characters come alive to me. And that, to me, is the really key to good storytelling. A good friend of mine who taught writing, creative writing, for many, many years at a college level, we were talking one day about this whole thing, and I was having an issue with a story I was grappling with, and basically asked him, any thoughts or advice, and he came back and said, well, don't overly concern yourself with plotting or pacing or all those other little elements that seem to get in the way, except tell stories about people, because people like to read about people. So basically, I think it to me ends up being the key to the whole passion of why we love listening to stories in all their myriad ways, and why I love telling stories. But at the heart, it's about the characters.
I could definitely agree with you there. I feel like, especially when you can fall in love or even hate a character, there's some villains out there, you're like, oh my gosh, I really hate, Dr. Moriarty, or you might be like rooting for Dr. Moriarty, in a Sherlock Holmes or something like that. But I love when you can believe, like, that the character's not real, that it's part of the imagination, but when they're so believable that you can visualize that character, or you can, you could see that character, and they become real, and I love that.
I've maintained all along over the years that the popularity, and you picked a classic example, Adam, the popularity of the Sherlock Holmes stories aren't the mysteries. That really isn't the case. It's people have fallen in love with Holmes and Watson.
Yeah.
And the more you read of them, all right, they take on a life of their own. So much so that, look what's happened. I mean, it's been years since the creator himself, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, passed away. But these characters live on. They live on because, again, we want to keep revisiting them. All right, we want to go up to 221B. We want to know Mrs. Hudson's downstairs getting breakfast ready or whatever. We want to hear Watson grousing about this or that. All right, and Holmes's stoic attitude. Again, we love the characters. They're real to us. So whatever the mystery is or the adventure or the case they're on is actually secondary. we'll forget that 2 minutes after we've read the story. What we remember is the characters.
I love that. You know, it kind of reminds me of gossip as well. Like gossip, and I don't like gossip as far as the negative aspect of it. I don't like talking about people or, you know, having people talk about me. I don't like that. But gossip to me is also like a carried on version of oral tradition, you know, where people talk and they talk about stories and stuff like that. And I don't know what the good version of gossip is. I mean, like, you know, having conversations or whatever. I don't know if there's like a word for it or not. But I remember as a kid, my grandparents and parents used to sit around the table and they used to talk, and, you know, we'd have relatives that come up, you know, they'd come up and they'd have dinner or whatever, and everybody would sit around and they'd talk and they'd tell these stories and people would laugh and they would joke, and, you know, and it was just I just loved that, you know, the storytelling aspect of it.
Right. It's how we communicate. All right. I mean, it's boiling it all down. All right. It's taking away all the extraneous, you know, things and trying to make people understand. And I've taught classes on writing, and so one of the first things I do, my first class is basically trying to make my students understand that we as a race, as beings on this world, communicate with storytelling. And, you know, they look at me when I say that, and the truth of the matter is just that. You walk down the street, Adam, and you see a friend you haven't seen in 2 or 3 days or 2 or 3 weeks, and, hey, Ralph, how's it going? Oh, it's going okay. How you doing? Oh, I'm okay. Oh, I got a new job, by the way. You did? Yeah, where did you get? And here we go. One person is telling another person a story. That's what we do. Oh, yeah. We communicate with stories. And it necessarily doesn't have to be gossip or something negative. It can be totally positive things. All right? I mean, 2 ladies meet at a supermarket. And, oh, my granddaughter just got accepted at this prestigious college. Oh, really? What's she going to major in? And again, we're talking about people and we're telling a story.
Oh, yeah. You know, when what was coming to my mind when I was talking about gossip was kind of like with the Sherlock Holmes, you know, like, for example, Sherlock, I mean, there's a lot of different aspects about him that kept him interesting, you know, like he was a coke addict, you know, and that, to me, back in the day, like, they use it as medicinal purposes or whatever, but we know what the effects of cocaine are now, and, you know, we could just imagine that, you know, no wonder he didn't sleep for days at a time, you know. That's the kind of juicy stuff that I think of, like.
And you give credit to Doyle, because ultimately, as he continued to write the stories, he understood, and you know, instinctively, as good storytellers do, all right, is that you have to keep rounding out and fleshing out your characters. And how do you do that? Well, you do that by their idiosyncrasies, their habits, what they like, what they don't like. So suddenly, again, well, like you said, there's the 7% solution, all right? He's an addict. Why is he an addict? Because his mind is so restless, it can't stand boredom. Then all of a sudden, in one story, he picks up a violin, and he's playing a violin. Where did that come from, all right? But again, it's every time Doyle added a new element, it just made the character more believable to all of us, and it just rounds him out. I don't know if you're familiar with the story about Robert Goldsborough, the writer, who ultimately picked up writing the Nero Wolfe mysteries after the original creator, Rex Stout, had passed away. But
no,
the way
I'm not.
Story, okay, so here we go. Right, I'm sure you're familiar with Rex Stout, because the whole idea with Nero Wolfe, a lot of people felt that Stout was himself inspired by Conan Doyle, and in creating Nero Wolfe, this fat detective who sits in his brownstone and never leaves it, solves all the mysteries right there in his home. His leg man, Archie Goodwin, is his Dr. Watson, and has the same formula kind of setups. But anyways, you know, Stout wrote 30-something Nero Wolfe novels and short stories and whatever. And again, the idiosyncrasies, these characters come to life to you. So
Right,
when he
right.
passes, right. So when he passes away, all right, I mean, there's this pall over all his fandom because he's gone. There's never going to be any more, Nero Wolfe solving the case, bringing in all the suspects like he did, and rounding them out in his office to point out who the killer is by sheer genius. Well, as it turns out, Robert Goldsboro, a New York writer-editor, one night is having dinner, and he and his wife had invited his mother over for dinner. And so during the course of the evening, they're talking, and somehow in the conversation, his mother, Goldsboro's mother, basically stated the thing that a lot of people felt. And she said she was sad because we would never get to visit the brownstone again. We never get to visit Archie and Nero, Fritz, his cook, who did these gourmet meals. We never go up with Hoffman into the where he had all his what do you call it? Now I'm drawing a blank. Oh, he was a gardener. He had all these great orchids. That's what he was. He had all the orchids upstairs, and et cetera, et cetera. All right, and so she was really despondent about that. And Goldsboro got to thinking about that and ultimately called his agent, who called the Red Stout estate. They ended up talking, working things out, and ultimately working with Stout's daughters and showing him the stuff that he had written on his own. They eventually made an agreement and allowed him to start writing new Nero Wolfe stories. Well,
oh wow,
yours truly being a fan, when these came on the market and I read about them, I grabbed them immediately, Adam, sat down, and the minute I read the first chapter, it was like I'd come home again. Characters that I loved were back. They were back because Goldsboro got Stout's voice. He got what these characters were all about, and he kept to their idiosyncrasies and their habits and whatever. And every time a new one comes out and I read it, it just reinforces that what we're talking about. The ability to write about real people that you know, that you've come to understand, that you cherish as friends and whatever. And that's what good storytelling is all about.
I love that. I actually have a kind of a story similar to that. We all know Dracula, Bram Stoker, right? And there is a prequel called Dracul that is written by J.D. Barker and Bram Stoker's great-grandnephew, Dacre Stoker. And when you were talking about, like, picking up that first chapter, you're like, oh, man, all these characters are right back in, that feeling of it. They did the same, they captured the same thing with Dracul. And because Dacre has done, like, his family has the estate for, like, all the Bram Stoker information and all that stuff. And Dacre does all these presentations and things like that. And J.D. Barker is a fiction author. He's been a best-selling fiction author as well. And those two paired up to get the cadence right and get the flow of Dracula. Yep. Right, and exactly. I'll tell you what, I love it. It was one of those things where it's not easy to do, especially like for example, you have a lot of characters that you actually created, and it would take somebody who is a true fan and also someone who actually really kind of thinks like that to be able to write that same character. But and I want to get into that too. But you write other characters like the Green Hornet, for example. How do you get into that mindset? Kind of talking about like the fun side of it. How do you get into that mindset of like, okay, well, I'm going to create a story for a well-established character who's been out there, and people are going to, either instantly feel like it's the right fit or they're going to reject it. How do you get into that mindset?
Okay, well, for that, I mean, and to me, the obvious answer to that, right off the bat, is that whenever a potential to write an establishing character has come my way, and obviously the Green Hornets, right up there with all of that. To me, it's just I don't want to reinvent them. It's the last thing in the world I want to do, because they do come with history. And that history has enamored maybe hundreds, thousands, who knows, millions of fans along the way. And so when I was first, pitching the idea, when the idea came to me about reviving the Green Hornet and bringing him back, up until this time, the only thing that I had been aware of, Adam, was that 60s TV show with Van Williams and Bruce Lee, which is what basically made me a fan of those characters, all right, and the Black Beauty and all that. And I knew very little, about the rest and the rich history that went beyond that until I picked up issues of the old Starlog magazine. And a good friend of mine, a writer and a gentleman who's easily one of the most talented writer, editors in the pulp field, Will Murray from Massachusetts, had actually written several histories of the Green Hornet going back to going back to his creation at WXYZ in Detroit in the 1930s, the late 1930s. So I got a hold of those articles by Will and started reading up on the radio Green Hornet and what that was all about. Well, it was through reading those articles that I then realized that the Green Hornet was related to the Lone Ranger. And I was like, oh, wow. I mean, the history just gets richer and richer, all right? So I am taking notes, Adam. I've got this notebook, and I'm taking copious notes and realizing, okay, so now he's a radio superstar back in the 30s and early 40s, so much so that Universal Studios came along in 1940 and did a Green Hornets 15-chapter serial, which was so popular that they rushed back into production and did a second one called The Green Hornet Strikes Again, which came out in 1941. So I made it a point of finding those serials, and I bought them, and I watched them several times, both, to the point where that was the concept with me. I did not want to reinvent or do, quote unquote, brand new Green Hornet and just start from, this was like 1989, 88, 89, and I could have just started and created a whole new Green Hornet for that period. But that would have meant just disregarding all that history that the character had, all right, the various incarnations that he went through. And then I realized, holy smokes, the challenge would be to pay homage to all those other creators, all right, and keep their Green Hornets, and develop this whole idea of, well, what if it's a legacy? What if they're all related? They're heirs to each other. And so basically the biggest challenge I had was to do each of those different incarnations of the Green Hornet and Kato to the best of my abilities and make them true and honest to the period in which they were active, leading the whole thing up at the same time creating this family mythos, Adam, that basically would imbue the entire concept, so that by the time we get to 1988, the modern times, which is Ron Fortier here writing, I am now going to bring you another generation of Green Hornet and Kato, but you will have seen all of that transpire, and to the point where they are just a continuation. They are the heir apparents to what came before. And believe me, that inspiration to do the series like that was ultimately what brought in the fans. Because literally I had people writing to me when the comic first started coming out. I had people writing to me, and basically a lot of them were fans of the 60s show, which had been gone almost 20, right? And I had friends writing me telling me they heard the radio program. I had gentlemen in their 70s telling me they loved the Green Hornet and Kato and were excited to see them back in comic form. So, again, like I said, if you're going to be doing a licensed property, then do your homework, get those characters right, understand what they're about, the essence of their stories, the reason why these characters exist in the first place, and respect that. Go on and write new stories, but don't reinvent them.
That actually, that's one of my favorite parts about doing, writing a story or character development is the research part of it. And I love that you spent so much time just learning about that character and then learning about, the backstory and the history and, the I don't know how you call it, but the progression of the character, and that the fact that you wanted to make it, I love the story mechanic where you wrote it in that there's a legacy, a heritage legacy with it, so that it makes like the story, the transition, so much more believable. It's like, oh, okay, well, this is the Green Hornet from 1912 to 1915 or whatever, and it goes on and on and on, and then somebody else picks up the mask and moves on with it. I love that idea.
Well, I actually had the fun, and again, I had the fun of meeting Van Williams after the comic was launched. And I went to a Green Hornet convention in Baltimore. He was the main guest. And then they had all of us guys from Now Comics, myself, the artist Jeff Butler, our inker Dave Mowry, the publisher. And Van was the guest. So we got to spend like 3 days in and around with Van and listen to him talk. Well, I have to tell you, the first time I met him, someone introduced us. We were all in the lobby checking in. And so I said, Ron, have you met Van Williams? And I turned around and I said, hi. I said, I'm a fan. We're shaking hands. And he goes, well, he said, I'm a fan of what you're doing with the comics. So, I looked at him and asked, Adam, let's go. Okay. He's a Hollywood personality, right? He's well known. And even then, he was a good looking man, always was. And so he's telling me this, right? And there's a part of me that's going, okay, yeah, well, maybe he's just being kind, right? But then the next thing he says to me was, man, he says, coming up with that legacy idea was brilliant. He says, I used to listen to that show when I was a kid on the radio. And
wow.
Of course. Then it was like, yeah, right. He was reading the comics, but it was reminding him of his own teenage years when he listened to WXYZ, the Green Hornet, and Kato Adventures on the radio program. So there you go.
That's perfect. I mean, that is that as a storyteller. I mean, I imagine that was like the best feeling in the world, wasn't it?
Oh my God, yeah. Because again, I realized he had a connection to the character, other than the fact that ultimately in his life he grew up to be an actor to play one of his own heroes.
Right.
Yeah,
I think that is so awesome.
Yeah, he mentioned how thrilling it was when he got that assignment, when he got the job, and then he spent the weekend regaling us with great stories of him and Bruce Lee and how they filmed it and the stories and the fun they had on the set and all that. And of course, all of us just bemoaned the fact that there was never a second series. What a lot of people don't realize is the reason there was never a second season is because the same studio was also doing and running the Adam West Batman show.
Right.
And basically what happened was, as they got near the end of the first 26 episode for a season, ABC pretty much told the producers they wanted the next season to be camped up like Batman. Because Batman was such a huge hit, they wanted the Zap Powie and the colorful, crazy characters, and basically make it a cartoon, which it never was intended to be. As I've told a lot of people realize is, if nothing else, the Green Hornet is pretty much a crime series. He disguises himself as a gangster. So, when that was basically handed down to the producers, they had a long talk, and ultimately it became almost what do you want to call a production team vote that they'd rather just cancel the show than see it made into a cartoon. And so that's what they did.
Yeah, I guess that would have been a really hard choice back in the day. Moving right along, talking about making production and like film and stuff like that. let's talk about your series, Brother Bones, and you've got this basically you created this awesome character and another legacy, and there's a group who are doing production work on like a live action movie, right?
Right. It would be a live action internet, like a streaming service series. All right.
Yeah.
That's the concept. Basically, what they hope to do, Adam, is the original Brother Bones collection, which is the first book, which is subtitled Brother Bones: The Undead Avenger, has 7 stories in it, and so the first is the actual origin story called the Bone Brothers, and then there are 6 other tales with him, adventures of Brother Bones as he continues on in this fictional city of Cape Noir that exists on the West Coast. So the producer, the gentleman who became, really fascinated with this whole series is a gentleman named Byron Patterson, and he in turn hooked, or I should say, brought on board a director friend that he has from Texas named Eugene Hawkins, and he gave him a copy of the book and said, read this. Eugene turned around to find, both of them were really, fans of the stories. They absolutely loved the character and what I had done with it, what I was doing with it. And so they, in turn, approached me with this idea of, we'd like to do a web series. And I went, okay, so explain exactly what that means. And it's the idea of basically, once they were in production and doing each story would be like an episode for a season 1, they would then shop it around to various streaming services, Adam, like Hulu or Acorn or even Netflix. Okay, and hope that somebody would pick it up like that, or even smaller independent outfit, and so people would basically subscribe to whatever outfit it lands on, whatever platform, and you actually watch this either on your computer monitor or on your television if you had that streaming capability. So where we're at is what they're trying to do is, again, there were 7 stories in the original collection, but because the first story is obviously somewhat longer, it is the origin story, they opted to take the first story and actually break it down into 2 parts. So it would be episode 1, part 1, episode 1, part 2, and then the subsequent other 6 stories would be episodes on their own, thus giving them an 8-episode season. They, in turn, went to a community college English teacher and writer named Jeff Provine and brought Jeff on board, and Jeff actually adapted the first script, and he did such a great job with it. I absolutely love what Jeff did, and so that was it. They started.
That's what I want to ask you. Was like that's kind of like where the tables have kind of turned with it. It's almost like with, not that you're giving away Brother Bones, but in this aspect, you've got someone who's adapting your story to a screenplay, and so you have to entrust them with that, with the character, not necessarily that they're doing character development, but character representation, right? And so how does that feel? Like, you said they did a great job. I mean, what was that like?
Well, I mean, look, the truth of the matter is, before Jeff was brought on board, Brian and Eugene both came to me, and basically when we worked out, that I was willing to option the character and let them run with this project, I mean, they, the common sense thing, they asked me if I wanted to write the scripts. And I don't think I didn't think of it much longer than 5 minutes, Adam, because the truth of the matter is I've learned over the years, all right, just being a fan more than anything else, all right, is that different medias have different, requests, different needs, I should say, all right. to make them work properly. And although I've written, hundreds of comic scripts, and now I'm writing prose, short stories, and novel, I'm really a novice as far as dealing with something that's going to be filmed. And so, thinking on that, I realized, you know what? Let's just get somebody who has experience doing that. Let's get somebody who's familiar with that media, all right, and let them do their thing. Because I'm sure you understand, and again, it was something that all of us discussed in conference. Once they brought, Brian knew Jeff. He'd worked with him in the past, and so they brought Jeff on board. And after Jeff wrote his adaptation, he sent copies to the three of us, and then we had a video conference discussing what he had done. And it was fascinating because, again, Jeff's had experience writing screenplays. The changes that he needed to do in the script, as per how I had written it, it works well if you're sitting there and reading a book. But there were things in the script that didn't work if you were going to adapt and film them. And Jeff immediately understood that, immediately picked out those spots, all right? And during the process, I think we met like 3 weeks in a row on video conference, and basically the four of us looking at, okay, so what do we need, via the producer, the director, what do you guys need from this script? And then it was a case of Jeff and I working together to meet what they needed. And there were times when we had to change things, and we actually would rearrange scenes that appear in the story one way are going to appear in the story in a different way to work again. That satisfy the needs of the media. And to me, that's another learning experience. I'm having a blast dealing with this. And again, I think it was a smart move for me to just let these guys, who are the professionals here, take it and run. I'm Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I'm pretty excited, too, because with the magazine episode, or the magazine part, you've graciously offered to let people read, like, the first chapter of Brother Bones, and I think that'll be wonderful. Like, it'll be a great tie-in so people, who may not have read Brother Bones can have a chance to, really get to know the character. So I think that's going to be pretty cool.
Okay. It's again, I'm only too glad to do it. And if nothing else, it's going to give them an example of what we're talking about here, because when you read that first chapter and then what you see, on film, on your TV or whatever later, when this is released and premieres, we'll have differences. We'll have, slight differences. Okay. But again, they're tweaks to work for film. And that's the other thing I was going to mention, because all of these gentlemen, especially the producer and director both, let me know emphatically, right, that their purpose was to bring my stories to film. And the last thing they want to do is to alter or change it in a way that it's no longer the story that appears, in print that came out of my imagination or whatever. So again, as long as they understand the essence of what I wrote, which I know they do now, all right, I'm more than okay with the subtle changes and tweaks that are necessary to make this thing come alive and have actual actors playing these parts.
That is really awesome. Well, Ron, I really appreciate you being on the show today. Where can people find out more information about your books and all your stuff like that?
Okay, well, basically, I have my own, website. I have a Facebook page, and I also have a personal website called www.airship27.com. I have a blog that posts every Friday morning, and that's how I keep my fans and friends up to date on what new projects I'm involved with, how the Brother Bones series is going. There is an actual internet website for the series itself, and that is simply one word, brotherboneseries.com. And if fans want to go if fans want to go check it out, I advise them to do so. They're going to find the biographies of the rest of the production team there, including, biographies of Eugene and Brian, Jeff. We've got a cinematographer, we've got a marketing agent, we've got a casting director. They've actually been casting. They've been casting for the last week. When they put up their original casting call on this particular website, within 48 hours they had 3,000 submissions.
Oh wow!
And then by the time they were done, they had over 7,000 would-be actors and actresses vying for them to look at their video clips, auditions, or whatever. So believe me, this production team has been really busy the last month. The hope is that by the end of November, they will have a cast in place, and I'm told that the start of December we'll start seeing press releases announcing who these characters are. I know who they've cast of Brother Bones, and I'm not going to steal their thunder, Adam. But I
don't do that. No spoilers.
No. I am beside myself. This actor has a resume that's the length of my arm. Believe me. All right, he has done so many things. He's got a following, and I could not be happier. So we're getting excited.
That's fantastic. That is really fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Ron, for being on the show today. I really love it. I love all the good stuff that you share with people, and I feel like you're a great example of a storyteller who actually does the work and enjoys what they're doing, and it shows. So thanks a lot, Ron.
Well, thank you for having me, Adam. And again, hey, I'm flattered to be a part of the premiere episode. Good luck with this. I am definitely going to be following it.
Awesome. All right, thanks everybody for tuning in. Have a great day.